Welcome to A View from the Hill, brought to you by the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce. My name is Michael Loy, and I'm the current chairperson of the Chamber Board of Directors and CEO of North Central Healthcare. Despite a global pandemic, your chamber has been working hard to continue to advance our business community through many initiatives. As we look forward, we believe the days ahead are encouraging as we look to continue to lead our region in growing our community and ultimately prosperity. Today, we are going to hear from the U.S. Chamber on issues and legislation important to the business community as the focus on Capitol Hill now turns to a new administration. Over the last year, the U.S. Chamber has been an invaluable resource to our local efforts, and we anticipate more good work to come. This session is designed to be interactive, and we encourage questions from the audience. You may type your questions in the chat box on the left side of your screen. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible within the time we have allotted. With us today is Ronald Eidshaug, Vice President of U.S. Chamber Congressional and Public Affairs Division. Ronald, take it away.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be with you. I wish that I could be with you in person. We were talking about this just as we were all joining. As you can see, my family, we're big mountain bikers, and we look to riding our bikes up in Wausau in the near future. Also, I would much rather be mountain biking than talking about some of the craziness that's going on in Washington, but I think that this is an important discussion for us to have. We really appreciate the opportunity throughout the pandemic and before the pandemic to work on issues together. And frankly, we're at a time now where our partnership, our ability to work together, your willingness to weigh in, engage on these issues is going to be crucial. So I want to talk about a couple of different things throughout this presentation, and then I really look forward to getting into the issues and the questions that you have and having a dialogue about things that are going on. So my goals are these. I want to start with where we're at now. I want to talk and sort of the political climate. I want to talk a little bit about what's going to happen between now and the inauguration. I want to talk a little bit about what is likely over the next couple of months at the beginning of the Biden administration. I want to talk about sort of, just business issues generally. And then I sort of want to ramp the discussion to a very broad level and sort of what's the business community's role in the larger political debate and governing debate that we're in the midst of now, and what do we need to do. I want to start off with a caveat. When I'm talking, I will be critical in some of my content and in some of my comments. I intend to be critical of policies or decisions. I am not being critical of personal people. I think what's really important and a baseline that I think that we need to have in our political debate and our governing debate is not necessarily to question the motives of our elected officials. I think by and large, elected officials are elected to do what they think is right and what they think is good. I think that we can certainly question what their policies would do, how they would act, things like that. But I'm not here to play a blame game. Also, there's plenty of blame to go around. Is it the Democrats' fault? Absolutely. Is it the Republicans' fault? Certainly. Is it the White House's fault? Totally. Is it Congress's fault? Yes. Is it the media's fault? Yes. Is it lobbyists' fault? Probably too. There's plenty of blame to go around, but we need to start focusing on how we're going to get away from a blame game as an excuse of, if I'm a Republican, oh, it's all the Democrats' fault. If I'm a Democrat, it's all the Republicans' fault. We need to move past that because Republicans, Democrats, Congress, and the White House need to work together on issues that are important to the business community because we need stuff to get done. So where are we at now? I think we all know that we're in a little bit of a tough space. I was looking through some of the poll numbers recently. Throughout December, so before sort of the events of last week, Trump's numbers were about where Trump's numbers have been. Right now, 39% of Americans, or in December, 39% of Americans thought that President Trump was doing a good job. 57% of Americans thought he was doing a bad job. Those numbers are nothing new. That approval number is not the lowest it's been for President Trump. He's been in that range throughout his presidency. What is also stark is when you dig into those numbers a little bit. Republican approval for Donald Trump, 87%. Democratic approval for Donald Trump, 6%. There continues to be a widespread partisan divide, and politics is certainly a shirts and skins game, white hat, black hat, on a lot of issues out there. Again, 9 out of 10 Republicans thinking that Trump was doing a great job, less than 1 out of 10 Democrats thinking that Trump was doing a good job in December. Those numbers are not new and very similar to other points in the president's administration. Only 16% of Americans think that the United States is moving in a good direction. Congress's approval rating is only at 15%. Again, those numbers aren't great. Nothing new, particularly Congress's approval rating. Congress's approval rating has been down in the toilet for quite some time. 65% of Americans polled, again in December, 65% of Americans polled thought that the Biden transition was doing a good job. Taking a snapshot from this week, Trump's disapproval rating, these numbers were taken Thursday and Friday of last week. 60% disapproval rating by a different poll, the Quinnipiac poll, and 67% of Americans also polled after last Wednesday's event think that the country is on the wrong track. So 2 out of 3 Americans in the Rasmussen poll think that America is on the wrong track. And I don't think it's any surprise that when you have numbers like this, how does that manifest itself? That manifests itself on a Capitol Hill being stormed, huge barriers going on up around the Capitol, which, as someone who lives and works in the Washington area, is really, really striking. I've never seen as much disruption to being able to go up to the People's House as there is now. And I don't know if you've seen in the news this morning, but there's been lots of pictures of National Guard troops sleeping in the Capitol, which is really, really very, very surprising. So that's sort of where things stand. I don't think any of this is a surprise. I'm sure that this is what we're all feeling. And I think that this is probably all the kinds of things that we're talking around our kitchen tables. And what's going to happen on January 20th? Joe Biden is going to be inaugurated president. The transition will be over, and it will be President Biden's job to set the agenda for Washington and to go on from there. What is that agenda going to look like? We still have, in the run-up to inauguration, impeachment. The House will vote on impeachment within the next few hours. I would expect that almost all, if not all, Democrats vote to impeach the president, and some number of Republicans to join in that vote. The paperwork will then go across the Hill to the Senate side, where the Senate will have to figure out what they're going to do. Do they begin considering the impeachment trial on January 19th? Do they begin considering the impeachment trial sometimes earlier? The important thing to remember on impeachment is that to impeach a president, the House needs to vote on a majority. To convict and remove the president of impeachment through that process requires 67 senators. So that's going to certainly suck a lot of the oxygen out of the room between now and the next several weeks leading up to the and certainly leading up to the inauguration. A lot of work also needs to happen. There needs to be a transition of government. This transition is moving more slowly in some areas. It is proceeding at a normal pace in others. One of the big causes for delay has been the Deadlock Senate. The elections in Georgia, which were not certified until just last week or the week before. I'm sort of losing track of days. But knowing who the majority would be made it difficult for the Senate to get together to have hearings on President Biden's nomination. Key nominations have had hearings scheduled, and they'll happen on January 19th. In previous transitions, some of these nomination hearings have happened earlier so that on day one, the new president would have his team in place. It looks like it is likely to have, President Biden is likely to have a little bit of a delay of some time in some of those confirmations. One of the really big issues that the Senate is going to have to grapple with, that Congress is going to have to grapple with, is how the Senate is going to work. It's a 50-50 Senate right now. And back in the day, back at the beginning of the Bush administration, there was also a 50-50 Senate for the first 5 months. Between January and May, there was a 50-50 deadlock. That deadlock changed when Senator Jim Jeffords from Vermont switched from being a Republican to caucusing with the Democrats, gave Democrats control of the House, gave Democrats control of the Senate. And many, particularly in the media, have pointed to that organizing resolution as a blueprint for how the Senate will work going forward. There's some really big differences and stark contrasts between now and 2001. In the 20 years since, the partisanship, particularly in the Senate side, has ramped up. In 2001, the Democratic leader, Tom Daschle, and the Republican leader, Trent Lott, got along really well. They were able to work together. They liked each other. I was actually Googling them this morning, and there was a picture of the two of them with big smiles on their faces standing side by side. If you Google a picture of Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell, you're not going to be seeing pictures of two smiling senators. Those two leaders have a much more difficult relationship, and it has been more difficult for them to work together and reach agreement on some of these issues, in large part because both of their caucuses are much more polarized and homogenous than the Republicans and the Democrats were back in 2001. So organizing, figuring out how the Senate is going to work will be a big challenge. In 2001, that blueprint, that organizing resolution, there was some certainty after Election Day that the Senate was going to be 50-50. So they had 2.5 months to work out how they were going to work together, what the committee makeup was going to look like, what staffing resources were going to look like, who was going to sit in the chair to preside over the Senate. All of these issues are really important and really matter in terms of setting agenda, in terms of getting things to the floor. In only a couple of weeks, in less than 2 weeks, McConnell and Schumer need to come to an understanding that both of their caucuses can support for moving forward. Also, there's a lot of drama on the House side. Speaker Pelosi is still the speaker. She was reelected. Her majority is very, very slim, with some of her caucus going over to administration posts. She only has a functional 2-seat majority at this point. So Washington is on a razor's edge of majorities in both the House and the Senate right now. You can't get very much closer to 50-50 government than we're at right now. That's a big challenge. Leaders on both sides can't lose many of their members. Party discipline, caucus discipline will be very, very important. Also, what's the good point of that? In a 50-50 situation, it can breed consensus. If you look back to 2001, President Bush, when he had 50-50 majorities, he got tax cuts done by Memorial Day. So during that period, during that first 5 months in a 50-50 Senate, President Bush got one of his biggest legislative accomplishments done. My boss, Jack Howard, was working as the White House lobbyist through this point. And we were talking on a staff meeting yesterday, and he was pointing out, tax cuts one thing, but how do you get to a tax cut? Doing budget resolution, doing budget reconciliation bills, lots of votes, lots of hearings, lots of committee work. It took an awful lot of work during those couple of months to get things done. And that Bush tax cut, the 2001 Bush tax cut, at a time, this is before 9/11. This is when, President Bush, elected by the Supreme Court, certainly didn't have a legislative majority, was able to build a coalition of Republicans and Democrats who voted for that big tax increase. Also got an education bill during that time frame. So even in a 50-50 Senate, even in a very, very closely divided House and Senate, there are opportunities to come to agreement and to get things done. What do we think the early Biden agenda is going to look like? Now, there's still a lot of dust to settle from Trump, from the impeachment and those kinds of things. President-elect Biden has not really, we haven't seen his State of the Union or his first address, and his agenda is coming together. One of the big things that he has talked about is doing another COVID stimulus and response bill. He's talked about amping up the $600 to $2,000 and increasing relief to state and local governments. We expect those to be very, very big issues. Getting to $2,000 when you need Republican votes could be a big challenge. But that's one of the things that I think is going to be top of mind for the Biden administration. Opening up discussion of the COVID stimulus bill, opens up questions like, could this lead to a minimum wage increase vote? That's one of the things that Biden actually mentioned a couple of weeks ago. And then there are open issues like the liability reform that the U.S. Chamber has been pushing, that I know that you all are very, very concerned with, that businesses that are doing the right thing, listening to their state and local leaders in terms of addressing, responding, keeping their employees and their customers safe throughout the pandemic, have some timely, temporary, and targeted liability relief from the trial bar. We've already seen the TV ads about, if you were hurt by COVID, we're going to go hit those deep pockets. That's certainly not an issue that is high on the Biden administration's agenda like it was on the Trump agenda and on McConnell's agenda. So we're going to have to see how that works out. In an opportunity to play offense, infrastructure is likely to be one of the big Biden things during the early part of this administration. We think that that's a good thing. We're launching this big initiative to get an infrastructure bill done by July 4th. We think that that's great. Also in February, the White House, the Biden White House, is going to come up with their budget and their budget request. Now, the budget request is really the Sears catalog wish list of what the Biden administration would like to see. Budget documents don't tend to always get the warmest reception on Capitol Hill, regardless of the president. The Democrats and the Republicans in the House and the Senate want to come up with their own priorities lists. What's going to be interesting about this budget process is budget and reconciliation. Budget and reconciliation only require 50 votes. Kamala Harris will be able to cast tie-breaking votes on issues related to the budget and reconciliation. So things related to taxes, things related to healthcare, things related to many issues, energy exploration, can be done through this budget reconciliation process where Republicans will have less of an opportunity to affect the outcome. For example, during President Trump's, I believe it was his first budget reconciliation go-around, there was a vote to open up Alaska and parts of Alaska to oil drilling in ANWR. That had been a big issue for decades and decades, where with a very simple, quick vote that didn't even have much attention off the Hill, ANWR was open to oil exploration. And then certainly early in the Biden administration, we expect to see a lot of votes on Congressional Review Act. The Congressional Review Act is is a law that allows Congress to undo regulations coming out of the administration, usually late in the administration. At this point, regulations that were finalized after about August 22nd look like they're going to be eligible for Congress to undo. And again, like the budget reconciliation process, the Congressional Review Act process will only require Kamala Harris to break a tie vote. So that Georgia Senate race where incumbent senators Perdue and Loeffler lost, leaving us with the 50-50 Senate, has a very, very big set of consequences in terms of Democrats, the Biden administration, able to move big chunks of their agenda with only a 50 vote, with Vice President Harris casting a tie-breaking vote. So that's a really big deal. Also, there's going to be some pressure, perhaps, to undo the filibuster. Undoing the filibuster can be done only with 50 votes through a change in the rules of the Senate. 50 votes with Senator Harris, with Vice President Harris. There are a number of Democratic senators who are already on record supporting the filibuster, opposing efforts to undo the filibuster. How that changes over the next several weeks and months, depending upon what Republicans on the Senate side do concerning some of the president's nominees, will be something to watch. So could the filibuster go away? It doesn't look like it at this point, but certainly something that we're going to be watching on. And as I mentioned earlier, sort of the situation when you have an evenly divided Senate, it can breed compromise. You're going to need the other side to get something done. And we know that as leaders, President Biden and Mitch McConnell have been able to get things done in the past. I remember from 2012, we were heading up on let me take a step back. It seemed during parts of the Obama administration, we went into every winter, every December with some sort of looming fiscal cliff on massive tax increases, defaulting on the debt, lots of issues. And in 2012, we were headed towards that fiscal cliff. Congress could not come together. And on December 31st, Mitch McConnell, who was then in the minority, went to the floor of the Senate and said, "I've called Joe Biden, then the vice president. I'm waiting for the vice president to call me back so that we can work out a deal." They were able to come up with a deal that Republicans and Democrats could support to avert that fiscal cliff. That was a good thing. So we know that Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell can work together. That's a good thing. Will they be able to work together? Is there enough room for compromise when caucuses are so partisan, when you've got the AOC wing of the party on the House side, when you've got some very strident conservative Republicans on their side? Will they be able to create middle ground in their caucuses to come up with agreements? So what does the chamber want to see here? I think one of the big challenges that the business community is facing and has sort of faced for the past several years has been this whipsaw of policy. President Obama came in, and particularly in the area of energy and environment, there were a lot of policies that came in that were certainly the types of things that wouldn't have come through through Congress. So a lot of regulations that could not be done through 218 and 60, could not be done through law. I'm thinking about in the energy space, in the CO2 space, in the climate change space, some in the labor space. the Obama administration had a very, very aggressive regulatory policy that amped up a lot of regulations. When President Trump came in, we saw tons of, I think, almost 24 regulations, almost 24 Obama-era regulations that were undone by the Congressional Review Act, which required at that point only a majority, only the Republican majority to undo. And then the Trump administration had a very, very aggressive deregulatory approach in many areas that the U.S. Chamber supported, in some areas that we opposed. Particularly in the energy and environment space, we thought that the Trump administration did a very good job on many, many regulations. In the immigration space, in some other areas, we had very, very big problems with what the Trump administration did, and we actually sued the administration in some of those areas. What we expect out of this administration is a very much more aggressive regulatory pace in some areas. And as I said earlier, it's only going to require Kamala Harris's vote to undo a big chunk of primarily energy and environment regulations that the administration finalized at the tail end of last year and that they're working to push out the door now. So one of the big challenges that we see is that when there's a change in majority, when there's a change in the White House, agendas change, regulations change, and the kind of durable, longstanding policy that the business community needs to make investment decisions, to make siting decisions, to make hiring decisions, to make all of these important decisions on which our businesses are based, get whipsawed back and forth. We would like to see something durable. So to do that, we need more of a durable political center. We need to get some things done. Certainly at the top of the list is going to be infrastructure. We want to see, as I said, getting an infrastructure bill done by Independence Day, working together with labor unions, some environmental groups, the business community, the chamber community, other associations. We're all going to join together to try and get that stuff done. On top of that, my boss, Tom Donahue, who's the CEO of the chamber, had his State of American Business address yesterday. Now, in this speech, which Tom has done for more than the past 20 years, Tom took a very, very, I think, broad approach to the political climate that we're in now. We need to create a safe space for Republicans and Democrats in the middle to work through. As I mentioned earlier, in a 50-50 Senate, in an almost 50-50 House, it's tough to get to compromise. But look at what the Problem Solvers Caucus did in December. Last spring, Congress passed the Phase 3 COVID bill. And that was the one with the PPP, amping up the PPP. They were able to agree with those issues and agree with a path forward in the springtime. Throughout the summer, the fall, and the early winter, there was lots of talk about what a Phase 4 bill was going to look like. What was Phase 4 going to look like? But the White House and Nancy Pelosi and McConnell and the House and the leadership, they could not come to an agreement on what that path forward would be. In December, the Problem Solvers Caucus in the House put together a proposal. The Problem Solvers Caucus is a group of Republicans and Democrats that are in the political center. A Democrat can't join without a Republican buddy. A Republican can't join without a Democratic buddy. And it's a couple of dozen members in the middle. They put together basically a $900 billion proposal. It was a little light on specifics and some details, but that is largely the proposal that got signed into law. A gang of senators in the middle began work on that too. So you had the problem solvers in the House and this group of not leadership senators, rank and file senators, get together on the package that was ultimately signed into law. I think that is going to be a model, perhaps not the only model, for getting things done in the very, very evenly divided House and Senate. And that's sort of what Donahue was talking about yesterday. We need to create a spot for civil dialogue. We need to start saying, oh, that's someone else's fault. And we need to start contributing to what's going to get done, and contributing to solutions rather than casting problems. One of the things that we did in our speech yesterday is turn it into a larger event. And we actually had two of the problem solvers, Representative Katko from New York and Representative Spanberger from Virginia, come in and talk about some of these issues. They've been able to work on things together. They've been able to build common ground. And we think that's great. Some of the things that we're going to be doing at the U.S. Chamber is we're going to be hosting Republicans and Democrats to talk about issues. We've already started to do that. One of the things that I think that we'd like to partner with you all on, and chambers across the country, is hosting meetings with our incoming members of Congress, our freshmen, and talk about the issues that are confronting all of us collectively and how we come up with solutions. And, I also want to fill you in on a little bit of the progress that we've had. At the beginning of the last Congress in 2019, in the State of American Business Address, Tom Donahue mentioned that we were going to update our scorecard. The U.S. Chamber has been doing our scorecard since 1965. We've had some little changes here and there, but not really big. Between 1965, we added scores in the 80s. We added lifetime scores that we used for endorsement decisions in the 90s, but not really big changes. 2 years ago, we said that we were going to start judging members of Congress on their votes on bipartisanship and their leadership on centrist issues that are important to the business community. So on the bipartisanship side and on the leadership side, these scores were going to recognize lawmakers even times on issues that didn't come up for a vote. We wanted to build a bigger way of recognizing and supporting members of Congress who were doing the right thing, working together to get things done. Last June, we had our first awards ceremony for members of Congress that won on the bipartisanship and on the leadership side. That was a great event. It worked out very well, and it is something on which we're going to build. One of the things that Tom Donahue also talked about yesterday, and Neil Bradley, who's our chief policy officer, talked about yesterday, is how we need to continue to be flexible and look at our political program too. If you look at the events of last week, of the storming of the Capitol, that was awful. It was disgraceful. It was really, really bad. It was deplorable. What can we as an institution do to make sure that those things don't occur again, and how to hold members accountable for issues like this when they come up? So we are looking at our political program to see how issues like this are going to be handled. We need members who are going to vote on constructive issues that are important to the business community. And just because you have a seat on the majority that's trying to help get something done does not necessarily mean automatic support from us. And there are certainly going to be some members out there who are going to forfeit our endorsement over some of these issues. That's also something that we're going to have to look at, and maybe we can have some of the discussion in the questions and answers as we get to that. So that's sort of where we're at now. We're calling on Congress to get an infrastructure bill done by Independence Day. We think that there's going to be some doable action to get that done. We think that that we as the chamber, and really one of the reasons why I'm so happy to be here a week before the inauguration to talk about these issues, is to work together to create an opportunity for us to talk with our members of Congress. And look, we got to treat our members of Congress like we treat children and like we treat pets. We need to reward good behavior. We need to be constructive and supportive when they are doing the right thing. We need to create a safe space for Republicans and Democrats to get stuff done. We are not going to get business community priorities by just relying on Republican votes. There aren't 218 Republicans in the House side. There aren't 60 Republicans on the Senate side. We need to work with the Republicans and Democrats to get these things done. Us working together can contribute to getting those things done. We're going to be very, very active in that space. Look, there's going to be some issues where we're going to disagree with the Biden administration and Democrats in the House and the Senate. Congressional Review Act, some areas of regulation, there's going to be some challenges there. I don't agree with my wife on everything. I still love her to death and don't want to be without her. We can't let disagreements on some of these policy issues throw away our efforts to get victories on important issues on legislation. And at the end of the day, as I was talking about, what we need are durable policies on energy, on labor, on taxation and fiscal spending, on all of these issues, and many, many more that are important to the business community. We need to create durable policies that are going to let the business community grow. We need to have smart policies that are going to get us out of this pandemic and out of the economic stagnation that we have had that is afflicting big chunks of the economy. And I look forward to, and the rest of the U.S. Chamber looks forward to working with you and Wausau to get these things done. So, Michael, maybe at that point, we can open it up to questions and take it from there.
Great. Thanks, Ron. That was a really wonderful overview of what's happening and what you anticipate. We do have several questions, and I anticipate more to come in. But as we've all shifted to this virtual environment, one of the things that has become kind of in vogue is what people put behind them in these meetings. So the popular question is relative to your guitars, and if you would just quickly let us know who your favorite guitarist. I think people would love to know.
Okay, two stories. So my favorite guitarist, my favorite band is Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. So Mike Campbell out of the Heartbreakers. And I don't know if you can see it. My camera is not working, so I can't see. But the guitar all the way on the far right and the guitar in the middle are two guitars that I built early in quarantine. We had some scrap lumber around. I bought a router. I had some time on my hands. So those are the quarantine guitars.
That's great. I think you've satisfied a lot of people's interest, but we'll get to some substantive policy issues now.
Well, Michael, I got to say, thanks for at least one easy question.
Yeah, I thought we'd get started well. You mentioned several major policy issues you think that the Biden administration will approach in their first term. Most presidents get one, maybe two major policy wins in their first term with the political capital they come in to office with. What, if you had to put your chips on the table for the one substantive issue that the Biden administration will push for and potentially achieve, what would you put your chips in?
So I think I'm gonna split my stack of chips into two decks. Number one is going to be sort of COVID response, pandemic response, and number two is going to be infrastructure. Now, I'm going to put an asterisk on both of those because both of those issues are likely to be, at least what's talked about, is going to be a lot bigger than just what we think about in terms of a traditional infrastructure package. And certainly probably something much larger than the $900 billion COVID package that the problem solvers and the gang of senators were able to get across the finish line in December. So, that's why I brought up the point about things like the minimum wage, some of the other issues that could be included sort of on the COVID front. And, looking at the infrastructure front, roads and bridges, that's sort of the bare minimum. Looking at broadband, we know that broadband has been a huge issue. This could even come up in sort of the COVID front where, lots of schools, lots of communities don't have broadband. And that is an issue that needs to be addressed. I think that that's one of the issues that the U.S. Chamber would strongly get behind. It's one of the issues that we thought is a priority for a long time. There's also then, if you're dealing with infrastructure, how do you deal with energy and clean energy and green energy? And if you're going to go down that road, do you end up in climate change land really quickly too, which is certainly a very, very controversial issue. And then does it become too controversial for infrastructure? Does that go on a separate track? So there's a lot of stuff. It's going to take some time to really see what the Biden administration is going to be, but that's, I think, where I would put my chips right now.
Our governor had a similar approach last night in his State of the State address. He prioritized broadband with a $200 million investment, and it's very important to communities and businesses all over the state of Wisconsin. So I'm sure that would be encouraging to our businesses. We'll kind of stay on the technology issue a little bit. A couple of weeks ago, there was a major attack that was disclosed on the government agencies relative to foreign entities trying to penetrate our technology systems. Our businesses here locally, it's becoming the number one issue in shutting down their technologies, their manufacturing potentially, and disrupting their business and revenue income. What can you say that is going to happen legislatively in response to this? It's been kind of quiet, surprisingly, over the last couple of weeks. There's been other, issues that have taken the forefront, but this seems to be a huge risk for businesses going forward, and there just doesn't seem to be a coherent strategy anywhere about how we're going to get ahead of this and protect our businesses and our communities and people.
Yeah, I think that that's a really, really important issue, and I'm gonna step up and step back on this question a little bit. One of the things that this administration and the Obama administration have done really well in has been to create sort of the public-private partnership for dealing with these cyber threats. And if you look at what this administration did, their head of CISA, which is the part of DHS that deals with these issues, had done a very, very effective job. The CISA part of DHS also was really, really good at when the pandemic first came down of setting up guidelines that states and local governments could use on businesses that were essential. So yeah, this is a huge issue. We know that DHS has done some good work in this area. They need to do more work in this area. You all may recall the name CISA if you're not familiar with cyber and all this stuff. That was the official that President Trump requested the resignation for when he was talking about election security and some of those issues. So in this area, getting confirmations done at DHS, at the top of DHS and some of the other parts of DHS is going to be very, very important. One of the things I do here at the Chamber is I sign off on all the letters we do. And yesterday, a letter came through from our cyber team saying we need a DHS person right away, and you guys need to schedule hearings. Like I said, hearings have been a little slow because of the uncertainty of the majorities in the Senate and things like that. The House Homeland Security Committee noticed a hearing on the DHS nominee for the 19th. That is good news. That's when the Senate is supposed to come back. If they're not going to come back earlier, it doesn't look like. So that's really good news. The nominee to DHS has a lot of experience in this area. It's someone that the business community have worked with in the past and someone that we at the U.S. Chamber will strongly support. So getting good people in place is going to be a big part of that. And, as I said earlier, in terms of building a safe space for Republicans and Democrats to work together, this is one of those poster children areas. Cybersecurity should not be a Republican and Democratic issue. And generally speaking, over the last several Congresses, this has been an area where Democrats and Republicans can work together. We're going to be super engaged in this space and want to have your partnership there too.
So the current administration has been very helpful in tax reform over the last 4 years, and leading into the pandemic, our business community here locally was really doing very well, growing, expanding. Our unemployment was incredibly low. Workforce is the biggest issue, and demand was there. As we look forward, what do you think will be walked back in terms of tax reform potential, and what are we going to see in terms of just overall tax reform in the 4 years ahead?
That's That's a really interesting question. I think it's a very important question, and I don't have a solid answer right now. I don't think we know. There is certainly big pressure from the left to undo the Trump tax cuts. I mean, we all work together very, very hard on this. That tax reform bill was a huge win for the business community. That's really, really important. It was really the first year plus of lobbying and pushing to get that done. That was huge. So we're really worried. I wouldn't say worried. I think that we're very concerned and are going to be very, very engaged in that space. As I said earlier, this is the issue of the Georgia races. You know, we went to sleep on the day after Election Day thinking that it was pretty clear that McConnell would remain leader of the Senate. And the Perdue race and the Loeffler race, both of them scored, both of them were the leading vote getters, less than 50%. Both of those races went to runoffs because of Georgia's system, and both of those senators lost. Republicans didn't turn out as much in both of those races as they did for Trump, and Democrats overperformed by just a smidge. So those two senators lost. What does that mean? It only takes 50 votes plus the vice president to deal with taxes. All that reconciliation stuff that I was talking about in terms of the budget, that only requires 50 plus the vice president. That's how the Trump tax bills got done. That's how the tax bills got done in 2001 with Bush, through this reconciliation process. So if Democrats hold firm, they have the ability to undo some of those taxes. Now, is the first thing that the Biden administration and Democrats in Congress want to do is increase taxes on business during a pandemic? I don't know. So I think that this is something that we are going to need to spend a lot of attention monitoring and working together on throughout. But it's certainly going to be a very, very important issue because the sides are so closely divided, and there doesn't need to be a bipartisan approach to undo some of those tax cuts and economic development opportunities that we saw out of the Trump tax bills.
So the message is watch closely.
Yes, stay tuned.
All right. So I'm going to test your congressional technicalities and procedural knowledge and just what's evolving there. You mentioned earlier about continuing resolutions and this fiscal cliffs that we keep coming up with almost quarterly, it seems like now, and that's the way the government's managing our fiscal future. Do you see that resolving itself anytime soon, or is that just the new normal? And then the second question as a follow-up is maybe if you could comment about the Speaker's decision to eliminate the motion to recommit. If you can comment on either of those two issues, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, if I forget about one of them, let me know. I'm sorry, what was the first one?
The first one was about continuing resolutions.
Yeah. Okay, so no, the budget process, the budget and appropriations process has never worked. This statute has been in place since the 70s or 80s or something like that, and I think there's only been 2 times where going through regular order in terms of appropriations and budget has worked. So yeah, we're going to have status quo where we're not likely to be able to finish up work on appropriations bills by the beginning of the fiscal year. Those bills become Christmas trees for a lot of other issues and a lot of important policy issues. When you have such evenly divided majorities, 50-50 in the Senate, almost 50-50 in the House, that's not an incentive for quick action. That's usually an incentive for more deliberation to construct the majorities you need to get stuff done. So, heading into last minute on whether it's appropriations on whether it's tax extenders, on some of the things that are coming up to expire. I don't see a big chance for those to be resolved. Also, when you see one party in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, there is an extra level of burden. Only one party has the burden of leadership. So if something is due to be to expire, it's up to one party or the other to come up with the solution to fix it. And we've seen this with the debt ceiling vote in years past, where the party in the minority was able to take pot shots at the majority and make debates about those issues on things that really aren't necessarily about the thing they're debating. A debate on the fiscal cliff becomes a debate on government spending and spending priorities, rather than, are we going to continue to pay our bills that we voted 6 months ago to pay? So yeah, I don't see a lot of I don't see a big change there. And then the idea to get rid of the motion to recommit, that's an interesting move. Certainly Republicans in the minority have been able to put some centrist Democrats in a tricky position on some of these votes. Democrats were able to do exactly the same thing to Republicans when Democrats were in the minority. That motion to recommit vote, and sometimes the majority party wins. There's a handful of times every year where the minority is able to undo the will of the majority. That's why those votes are so important. With Pelosi only having 2-seat majority now, with a couple of impending vacancies, at most 5-seat majority, she doesn't have a lot of wiggle room, so you can sort of understand where she came from. You can understand why she did it, why the Democrats did it. You can also understand and appreciate why the Republicans are extraordinarily upset with that, because that is perhaps the strongest tool that the minority has to have their voice heard.
Great, thanks. Looks like we got about 2 more questions here, unless something else comes in. The first is just generally about economic policy, if you could comment on it. One of the things that happened in the last administration, or the current administration, was the creation of opportunity zones for our economic development across the United States. And here locally, we were able to develop one of these opportunity zones, and we're in the process of repositioning our downtown mall and our downtown area. Can you just talk just generally about where you see economic policy going generally? We've done a lot to keep the economy going over the last 12 months. There's a lot that we'll have to reckon for at some point, given the fiscal and monetary policy that's been going on. But just generally, where do you see economic policy in the first part of the Biden administration?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure that I can give it a whole answer, but I'll do my best by giving it a half answer. Okay. So, number one, I think Congress, and taking this out of the Democrat-Republican partisan politics thing, I think Congress has had a difficult time trying to get their arms around the state of the economy. We talk about the K-shaped recovery. There's lots of sectors that are doing gangbusters. Online retail, they're doing great. Several other sectors doing very, very well. Entertainment, hotel and lodging, restaurants, hospitality, doing awfully. Lots of small businesses we know are look, a lot of them have gone out of business. Many, many more are just scraping by. It's a tale of 2 economies, and coming up with the right policy tools has been difficult there. Looking at what the administration is doing, and I mean SBA, and I mean really worker bees at SBA, less so even senior leaders at SBA, on what they're doing on the new draws on PPP, where they're keeping access to the new draws that are coming out. For the first couple of days, they're going to keep it exclusively to CDFIs, which are community development financial institutions, some minority deposit institutions, certified development business certified development centers, and microloan intermediaries, some of the small guys, to make sure that the smallest businesses, the hardest hit businesses, the least able to access some of these tools because they're smaller businesses without access to attorneys and accountants and banks and all that kind of stuff that some of the larger small businesses have. But by creating some avenues for these smaller, more focused businesses to get relief for the first couple of days is, I think, one of the improvements that they're trying to make to these programs going forward. I think as we see the transition to the new administration, we're going to see some other efforts in this area, just as the people change and the ideas change. But I think that there's going to be a lot of work in that space. So I don't know if that sort of mentions it. I think that's probably about a half answer. Does that sort of get to it?
Yeah, I think it's encouraging. I mean, our small businesses are the ones that are really suffering the most in this pandemic, and to hear those things being a point of focus going forward is very important to our community, and I think the entire economy. So I do think you touched on it, given the relative unknowns with the administration not even starting yet. So the last question I have for you today is relative to what we're seeing with social media censorship. You saw an unprecedented move with social media taking not only certain individuals, the current president and others, off of their platform temporarily or permanently, but also you saw a alternative social media platform being taken off of Amazon Web Services completely. And then you see now today there are a number of corporations and individuals that are pulling back donations that were being made to politicians on the other side of this vote around the election. Where do you see that unfolding? I would assume that most politicians are threatened by that, not just one party. And really, where does that put us going forward in the future from your perspective? And what legislation do you think will come as a result of what's going on relative to big tech and freedom of speech?
Yes, a lot of issues there. And, you know, I think that we as the business community need to recognize or need to, you know, just sort of common ground is, you know, our ability is limited in terms of holding our elected representatives accountable. We can vote and we can either support or oppose candidates. That's about it. And so, you know, you see certainly in the space with some of the companies, look, there's a lot of companies that have announced PAC freezes. We have not done that. What we have talked about is how we are going to change our political program to make sure that we are taking into account whether members are part of the solution or part of the problem. And that's something that we need to look at. But at the end of the day, corporate America is not in charge of the First Amendment. First Amendment deals with governments creating laws. The business community does not want to be the First Amendment police. There's also a big responsibility in that system for how people use these platforms and how people communicate. People inciting violence on elected leaders is unacceptable, whether it occurs on Twitter or a soapbox. That is wrong. Beating a Capitol Police officer in the head with a fire extinguisher is wrong. Ripping Nancy Pelosi's plaque outside of her office, sitting at her desk and rifling through her drawers is wrong. That should not occur. Those kinds of actions are forcing companies to figure out how to deal with their policies. We, as individuals, need to think before we speak. Inciting violence, inciting sedition is wrong. That is, and what happened last week was not peaceful demonstration. Had there been a bunch of people going up to Capitol Hill with flags and signs they would have been welcomed into the Capitol. You go through the metal detectors, you talk with your members of Congress. Slamming through windows, killing a police officer, killing protesters through your actions is reprehensible. And having a way, so how does tech deal with that? Frankly, how does Congress deal with that? This is something that we are all going to have to grapple with. Congress is going to have to deal with that. The chamber is going to be very, very engaged in this space. And we, the U.S. Chamber, the Wausau Chamber, the business community, are going to need to work together on these issues too, because we can't turn a blind eye to statements, to activity, to speech that goes over that line. How's that for an answer?
That's there's quite a lot in there, and certainly there's a lot ahead of us to grapple with those issues because they're significant, and obviously everybody's watching. So the days ahead will indicate and tell us a lot about where we're going as a country, and we certainly look forward to your continued insight and support to our local chamber and then chambers all across the United States. We've covered a ton of ground today, so thank you, Ron, again for all your insight. That'll do it for today. I want to thank all of you for participating on the call today, and hope you have a great rest of your day and stay healthy, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. We'll see you later. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.